Hey, welcome to the Covalent Careers Workshop for Physical Therapists. We are going to be talking about goal setting, interviews, negotiating, and then finding jobs. And we'll go through, likely most of it will be around jobs after graduation, but this will also pertain as well to people who have already started their careers and are looking to make a change, whether it be because you're looking for a different setting or you're looking for a different patient population, or you're just looking for, in general, to work for a different employer, or even if you want to start something up on your own and you've had enough, looking for a change.
So I'd say that when you start your career, it probably should start with goal setting, right?
Yeah, I think before making any decision in life, especially when it comes to your future, you always need to think about the goals first. And if you start there, the likelihood of you getting a positive outcome, both in the short term and in the long term, will significantly increase. And a lot of times goal setting is annoying and difficult because it takes time. You really have to think about yourself, your values. Do you value money? Do you value knowledge? Do you value connection with other people? Your value system is going to dictate the goals that you have. So think first about your values when you're creating goals. The next thing that's important when setting goals is timeline. Think about when you want to achieve your goals by. And then the final thing you want to set your goal on is magnitude, of how much of each of your values do you want to have. So if you have all of those components in your goal, finding a solution and a path to get there will be significantly easier.
Mm-hmm. How do you manage whenever your goals start shifting and changing? Because, I would say that's probably not terribly uncommon, right?
Yes.
Even as you go through your career, your goals might change. And then how do you adjust your career for that?
So it's very interesting. There are some people who have a beat on their life and they know exactly what they want from when they're young. But that's not true for everybody. And the majority of people, they start with one goal, but after they get experience, they realize that they have different values than they thought they had, or they have different desires than they thought they had. And the core value system might not change, but the subtleties within the goal might change along the way. For instance, in business, we call that a pivot. If we're going towards one thing and we have a strategy to get there, we may at some point pivot, and we might change our goals based on new information that we have both about our business and about ourselves. It's the same thing when you're setting goals in life personally. You want to utilize all of the information that you've collected along the way to then reassess the desires that you have, because you'll have different reasons for them at different points in life.
So once you've set all your goals, for physical therapists that are in school, physical therapy students, and, they might be, they haven't quite graduated yet, but it's important to start goal setting early, as you said. Let's talk a little bit about the job search. When is the perfect time to start looking for jobs? Where do you look for jobs? And what do you need to apply?
Yeah, I think when we talk about looking for jobs, again, we first have to start looking for jobs by setting our own internal clock and our internal timeline on where we want to be in life. 2 months from now, 5 months from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And what I mean by that is if you are, for instance, you're going to be graduating in May, but you understand that what's important to you at that time is having a few life experiences before you start your career. You may want to put off the quote-unquote searching part of your job a little bit, and that's for a few reasons. One, you might find that your values change along the way, and where you want to work might change as well based upon new life circumstances. Like, let's say when you were in school or you were about to graduate, you really liked orthopedics, and that was your goal, to get an orthopedics job. But then you went traveling and you took a month off after school, after you took your boards. You passed your boards already, but first, you were in a scenario where you had the time and you had the resources to go and travel. And you went on these travels and you met some people, and you realized that it's not about the setting for you, but it's actually about the experience. So you actually might just want to do travel therapy. So your goal there and the setting that you were going after may have changed based on your new experiences. And that happens a lot in life. That's incredibly common. And that's a good thing, because now you have you're sitting at a higher level of knowledge about yourself. Life in general is a journey of of figuring out who we are as individuals. And the more people we meet, the more experiences we have, it'll tell us about those things. So to answer your question more directly, when it comes to looking for a job, I would start networking with people immediately.
Maybe as soon as you start school?
Like as soon as you think about networking.
Okay.
Like right now, I would start networking with people. And that could be anybody in the industry because you never know who you're going to meet and you never know what opportunities will come about from meeting those people. And after that, when you're looking specifically for a very specific job, if you have your goals down, if you have everything dialed in, I would start at least 3 months before you are actually looking to start working, but really no sooner than 6 months before, like actually looking for that very, very specific job. And why would I say that? Because you may spend a lot of time spinning your wheels on jobs that won't be available when you need them to be, if you're looking 7, 8, 9, 10 months out. But if you're in that 3 to 6 month sweet spot, you'll likely find employers who have a hiring need and would be willing to wait for the right candidate to come along. And if you can prove to them that you're that right person, you're going to get that job and they're going to wait for you.
Yeah. Where's a good place to look for jobs?
You're really going to want to look for jobs everywhere. And we have a lot of students and new graduates ask us, hey, is it still okay if I call up a practice and ask if they're hiring? And my answer is, of course. You want to do everything to set yourself up to get the job that you really want. Not every job is created equal. Not every employer is going to be created equal as well. When it comes to choosing a position, I mean, based on my experience in life, when you hit a certain threshold of money, when you hit a certain threshold of pay, getting more money is not going to make a difference for you. Like, yeah, you may be able to buy new things, you may be able to buy a nicer shirt or nicer shoes or whatever it may be, but that's not really going to do much for your happiness level. So once a job is going to hit like a specific threshold, you're really looking for culture in a practice. You're looking for something that fits with your desires and what you want out of life. In life, we want to be happy, and
Right.
that's the purpose. We want to be happy. We want to be at peace. We want to have those experiences that are going to drive us. They're going to give us energy, and you can very, very easily get bogged down if you take a job that doesn't align with your true core values. When you're thinking about the positions that you want to take, you really want to look everywhere so that you give yourself the best opportunity. So a few places you can go, obviously Covalent Careers. If you know that you want to be in Plainview, Long Island, you can look up physical therapist practices in Plainview, Long Island. You can go to each of the websites. You can learn a little bit about the practice, and then you can call the practice. Other places you can look, obviously, Indeed.com. You can look on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place to search for other industry individuals, other physical therapists. You could probably find practice owners and connect with them on there, just so that they know your name. They'll associate with your name then if you apply for the job with your resume, and that'll be just another touch point that you get with that employer. So I just recommend, again, I recommend going everywhere to look for jobs. But really, those are the big three. If I was searching for a job today, I would probably go on Indeed and search and see what jobs are on there. I would go on Covalent Careers and I'd see what jobs are on there. I'd go to LinkedIn and I would try to connect with other physical therapists and employers that are in the network in the location where I want to practice. And then I would also call all of the places around the area and find out if they're hiring. Because if they are, and you call them, you know, you'll be able to maybe schedule a time to go in and meet them and do things that are going to make you stand out. Because one thing that I can promise you is either a lot of your classmates or a lot of your colleagues are likely not going to be doing that.
What would you say is necessary to apply to a job? I mean, are employers looking for resumes? Are they looking for CVs, cover letters? I mean, what would you say is really the most important thing to have in hand when you're applying for a job?
Yeah, and I'm going to give you this from an employer's point of view. Although I don't employ physical therapists to perform physical therapy services, I can tell you about my experience reviewing resumes and hiring people in general. And then I can also tell you a little bit about the physical therapist resume as well, which is more important. The first thing you always need is your CV, is your resume. And the resume is an important piece to have, but the resume is not what's going to make or break you. The resume is going to get you just across that first part of, like, am I going to communicate with this person or am I going to disregard them? And usually as a physical therapist, the employer is only going to be looking for a few things. One of them is, are you a physical therapist, which you can get across very
Right.
easily. If you currently have your license, list your license number and the state that you're licensed in up by the top, because then you're already breaking through, and they're likely going to want to connect with you at that point. Or else they may, at that point, want to read your cover letter. So you'll get to the next stage by just proving that you are relevant to the position. After that, you want to list the experience that is going to be most relevant to the job you're applying for. So if you are applying for an orthopedic position, you want that experience to be at the top, and you want that to stand out. Because when an employer is reading through resumes, if they have a lot of resumes, let's say they get 50 resumes, they're really going to just be skimming the resume for the bold headings, and they're not going to be looking at those sub-bullets that you spent so much time trying to perfect every word in there, which I do recommend doing, because putting your best foot forward is always important. But the likelihood is that the employers aren't going to be really reading through those very thoroughly, because they know what you were doing in an orthopedic clinic. If you can treat an orthopedic patient, then you can treat an orthopedic patient, and they'll likely bring you in for an interview, when they would then be able to find out more about you and your skills and your thought process behind it. They're going to cover that later down the line. The other thing you want to always, always, always have is a custom cover letter for the position and the specific opportunity that you are applying for. And what I mean by that is, let's say you are applying for physical therapist practice in Plainview, Long Island. But the first thing you do is you go to the website and you look at who are the physical therapists there, who is the likely person who's going to be interviewing me, and learn about them and write specific things about the practice and what you enjoy about the practice within that cover letter that shows that you've done your research. And the reason why you want to do this, again, is because nobody else is doing it, or very few people are doing it, so it's going to make you stand out. And standing out is what's important, especially if you don't have experience. If you're a student that's just coming out of school, you've just graduated, although you do have clinical experience, the employer is going to value that differently than actually practice experience. So you need to stand out, and you can stand out in that cover letter. And then once you have that cover letter, that's going to get you to the next part, which is the interview, which is going to seal the deal for you. And the interview is a super important part of the process.
Let's talk a little bit about the interview. How do you prepare yourself for an interview? What are the most important things that employers are looking for during an interview? And maybe let's run through some questions, the most common questions that you should be prepared to answer.
Sure. So the most important part of the interview, hands down, is confidence in the way you present yourself, the way you hold yourself in that interview, the speed at which you can answer their questions, and really not even what you're saying to their questions, but it's the confidence at which you project yourself in your answers. And if you're sitting there and you're like, and you're looking down at the floor, and you're shying away in the corner, and your body language is slouched, and it looks like you're nervous, then likely you're going to get a different result than if
Sure.
An employer asks you the question and immediately you have an answer to it, or even if you're saying something to them and maintaining eye contact. Now, if you don't know the answer to a question, or you need to think about it, you can always use that's a really great question, and that will buy you a moment of time to then think about your answer and start talking about your answer. So in the initial interview, some of the questions that you might get asked are going to be based on your experience from the past. So the employer may go through your resume, and they may ask you about your clinical experience. They may ask you about patient experiences that you had and the reasoning why you chose to perform a specific type of treatment, or they may ask you about how you came across a diagnosis or something like that. If you're using patient stories, they may just probe a little deeper into those. So always be prepared with those things. So pinning off that point of preparation is key, because preparation is going to lead to confidence, because you've gone through the motions of answering these questions before. So the best way to prepare is to get a list of as many questions as you think an employer may ask you, and you can probably get a resource, not probably, you can get a resource like that on covalentcareers.com. Just look for commonly asked interview questions. And you'll want to go through mock interviews with a friend. So find any friend, like I would ask Antonio, can you be the employer and go through these questions with me, and I will answer them, and try to throw me some curveballs in there, just maybe interrupt me sometimes and see how I react. And it's just like a baseball player who's trying to prepare for the World Series. You want to go through all of the scenarios that may happen so that you're prepared for, that curveball when it might come. Same thing when it comes to interview questions. You want to just throw yourself curveballs, because then you'll be as confident as you can be, and you'll know that you've prepared as well as you can for this interview, and you can never be hard on yourself after that. But that will get you to a place where you will stand out. If you practice, you will stand out, because you will do a better job at that interview itself.
So say you go on an interview and you interview well, and then you ultimately get hired for a job. What does that contract look like? Are you typically sent a contract? What's in that contract? And what are some of the key things you need to look for when you're reviewing a contract? And do you need to seek legal counsel to review this for you, or is it pretty straightforward enough that you can kind of tackle it yourself?
So there's a few points there. The way that it should be done when presenting an offer is, first, if I were an employer, the first thing I would do is call you on the phone and tell you that I want to offer you the position. I would go through what would be in this offer letter for you, and I would ask you if you have any concerns. And I would do that for a few reasons. And the first reason is because if you do have concerns, I'll be able to hear them out, and I'll be able to come up with a strategy to help us get to the result that we want, which in this case, I've determined that you're the physical therapist that I want to hire, and now I need to we need to basically come to an agreement on the terms of our employment here. And then that second step is I would send you an offer letter. And at that point, that would go through the basics of the agreement. It would say your salary in it. It would say you're working full time. It would say your benefits, just the basics. And then after you sign that agreement, then I would furnish a full employment agreement that would go through, like if I had a non-solicitation clause or whatever, the legalese. I would have all of those in that employment agreement. That would also probably point to my employee handbook, which talks about the rules at our company and the rules that you're going to need to follow while you're there. That everybody in the office is always under this employee handbook or employee manual. You might hear it termed either way. At that step, I would recommend having counsel look over it, because there may be terms that you don't know what they mean. Most of the times they'll probably be anywhere from 5 to 7 pages long. It's always best to consult legal counsel before signing an employment agreement, but if I got to be completely honest here, when I got my employment agreement for my first job, I didn't go to legal counsel. I just went to friends and colleagues who I just pinged questions off of, and I read through it thoroughly prior to engaging with my employer. Anything that looked suspect to me or the language looked a little interesting, like, hey, like that, that sounds kind of crazy or whatever it might be. I always looked to a friend or colleague to clarify, and if it seemed to be the widely accepted practice and everybody said that same thing to me, then I was okay with it personally, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be okay with it personally. So the best practice is to hire someone for the $200 to $500 that it may cost you to read through this agreement, and that could save you problems down the line.
Yeah, and say you do get this contract, and for the most part it looks great, but there's something about it that you're not maybe happy with. Maybe it's paid time off, maybe it's salary. What I want to do is talk a little bit about negotiations,
Sure.
right? What are some top tips for negotiations, and what typically are things that you can negotiate in a contract?
Sure, and that's going to depend on the organization, what things you can negotiate, because strangely enough, some organizations have like set in stone policies, like true set in stone policies that for some reason they won't be bend on. If it's a very, very large hospital group, for instance, they might truly have specifics like the hourly rate that they're just not going to negotiate on. And if you're trying to negotiate and you won't bend on it, they just will move on. Even if it's not the best choice for them, that's what they will do. But what I'll say about negotiations is negotiations start at your preparation from your resume and beyond, and even the things that you do in your career prior to that. So, like if you, for instance, had started a website and learned new skills, that's part of your negotiations because that's increasing your value. Negotiations are not a process that starts with that communication, which most people think it is. Negotiations start with who you are and what you do in your career to increase your value. Because this is a negotiation is essentially coming to an agreement on what the value for value exchange is. And if you can show that your value is higher, then you're going to be able to negotiate from a higher standpoint there. So the first thing is to set yourself up as someone who has additional value from other physical therapists if you really want to have true negotiation leverage in that area. The second thing I'd say about that is start the negotiations before you get an agreement. And you want to be in an engaged conversation with the employer just as much as they want to be in that conversation with you, because then you can learn where they stand on issues. And the biggest thing with negotiations is asking more questions. A really great book that I would recommend to everyone is a book called Never Split the Difference. That book is a really great book, I think, for tactics to negotiate salaries or terms within a deal for an employment agreement, let's say for a physical therapy contract. And it's the subtleties within that will help you. If there are places that you'll be able to negotiate more frequently than others, it's going to be in, let's say, a retention bonus. That's going to be a lot easier to negotiate than an increase in pay, because what the employer is thinking to themselves is, like, I really don't know what additional value this employee is going to bring me. But the longer you're at a practice, the more value you're bringing to the practice, because the costs of vacancy and the costs of turnover for a practice are significant. So if you're just going to be at a practice for 3 months and you leave, you did not provide that practice that much value. But if you're going to be there for 10 years, then you're providing significant value, and you'll be able to command that year after year after year. When it comes to negotiating things like raises, or at least getting a general understanding of when are we going to have that conversation about a raise, what's that going to look like, I would recommend having that conversation before you sign any agreements. Because once you sign the agreement with them, then your leverage decreases significantly, because you've already agreed on terms. So both morally and legal obligations, whatever they may be, are on paper, and you've have this moral obligation to the person because you're coming in on terms that you've agreed to as human beings. Those are two separate things, but they're connected.
So where can we get in touch with you if we need help with negotiations, contract review, and just general finding jobs?
Yeah, so Covalent Careers is a career development company, and we're really here for you. If you have any questions whatsoever, just call us up, and somebody at our organization will help you. I'll help you personally. I am a physical therapist myself. I've been through these things, so I can be helpful with questions about anything from what is it like to work at X, Y, or Z position, to negotiation strategies and things like that. But you can connect with me at any time at Brett, B-R-E-T-T, at covalentcareers.com. And you can also get me, you can honestly just call my phone. The number to the phone is 858-780-4455. And you can call me there, you can text me there, or you can get me on Facebook, Brett Kestenbaum. I'm on Facebook. That's an easy way to get me, either just putting a post on my Facebook account or just shooting me a message in Facebook. And if you ask me a question, I will respond.